Once again, we welcome you to Moving Forward with Young Voices. And we are happy to welcome back to the program this week, Agustin Forzani. Agustin, good to see you once again. For those meeting you for the first time, take just a moment to tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Brian. It's great to be here. I am Agustin Forzani. I am a professor of economics at the Catholic University in Argentina, and I am also a director of a family business here in Argentina as well.
All right, let's dive into the topic of tariffs. There has been a lot of talk about tariffs, and I think I actually saw today an article saying that there may be some kind of an upcoming court decision, and maybe all of the tariffs taken in by the Trump administration will have to be refunded. But for the moment, let's talk about the hidden costs behind these tariffs. Where do we begin to start to understand what those costs are?
Yeah, a month ago, approximately, and as you know, with these tariffs, these topics are changing all the time. So I wrote an article for the National Review in which I tried to talk about the hidden costs, that tariffs have in the economy. So these are kind of specific costs that appear in the economy when you apply certain tariffs to certain products that normally are unseen, as you can say. So you kind of have two specific costs related to the tariffs. The first one has to do with the custom burden, I call it in the article, which relates to all the costs that you will have that increase given that you apply tariffs to certain products. For example, when you decide to apply a tariff to a specific product, normally what happens is that importers try to import as much as they can fast, quick enough, because to avoid the tariffs when they start to apply to take effect. So in that time you have a lot of workload for the customs, the people in the government that are in charge of controlling what passes through the through the border, and all the private sector that backs up companies that try to import certain product. You have to contract a specific custom agent to help you import the specific product. So you will have a lot of workload of those people before the tariff starts to take effect, and after also, maybe because because of the tariff there is a reduction in the importation of that specific product. But still, as tariffs change all the time, and they have to these custom brokers have to be up to date all the time, and it's kind of really complicated today to be in that business. So I cited like another article from the Wall Street Journal in which there are interviews for different companies that are dedicated to this custom brokers, and they are uh, working 13 hours workloads. They are quite busy today because of this complexity. So that's a part of the costs that you have. Um, but then you also have, and this could be not too high. You could argue it's not that high, that cost. But there is another hidden cost which has to do with the lobbying, with all the rent seeking that you end up having when you apply a tariff. Um, and this you have to think in two ways, I would say. First, you have the producer of the specific product. For example, think about U.S. Steel or aluminum producers, which are in favor of putting a tariff of steel from Canada, from Brazil, or from Argentina, because that would be great for them, because it would be more business for them. They will be able to raise their price or to sell more. Um, so you will have certain people in that business um, that are going to be are going to start lobbying the government to get the tariff, and that's going to be time and resources wasted just to put the tariff in their favor. But you also have to think about the other part, the consumer of or the or a certain company that buys steel or aluminum that will want the opposite, will want a reduction in their tariff. So you will have certain specific people from those companies, car manufacturers, for example, that will be working to get that tariff reduced. So you will have a back and forth between, normally lawyers of those companies uh, um, having dinner with the lawmakers to have a rise or a decrease in the tariff. So that's pure waste for the economy. That's not prod productivity. That's not resources that are dedicated to increase production or innovate or produce better products. You end up that is just pure waste for the economy. That's huge. That's quite detrimental for the economy. So that's what I try to do in this article.
I have to admit, something I really hadn't considered, but you brought this out, is when lobbyists are looking for, I mean, some of them want the tariffs because it strengthens their position in the market, keeps out competitors. But on the consumer side, that limits our choices. And it seems like when we have more choices, that's when that competition not only drives up the quality of whatever it is that we're buying, but it also helps to find a good equilibrium in terms of the price.
Yeah, so and you have to think about that side of normally that's not considered, but you have associations of car manufacturers or pharma companies or different companies that want reduction in their inputs or consumers maybe. Consumers in the end, associations of consumers of a specific product that want a reduction in their tariffs. And they will spend time and resources to get a reduction in their tariffs, and that's going to be I mean, they are defending their interest. That's what any rational person would do. That's okay, but that's a pure waste for the economy. We have to consider that side, because it's a you are actually reducing the productivity of the U.S. economy because people are not dedicating to what actually increases wealth, which is dedicate time and resources to the most productive activities.
So when someone says, well, if you want lower prices, just buy American, what you're explaining is that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get lower prices because even those American manufacturers, their production costs go up in relation to the tariffs as well.
Yeah, well, you can argue, well, a specific producer won't have their product, their so yeah, their specific product increased in their price, but you have to think marginally here. Uh, this producer, which maybe you say, yeah, let's produce U.S. steel here in America. Let's produce aluminum here in America, and those products are not going to be. If you produce in America, you won't be tariffed. That's what Trump and Secretary of Commerce Latnik say. They say specifically that you won't have a tariff if you produce in America, but your inputs will have a tariff, and you will end up with a increase in your costs. So you have to consider part of the
Love media.
X Agustin Forzani. I post all my links there. LinkedIn, the same Agustin Forzani.
And we are back on Moving Forward with Young Voices. Happy to welcome Nicholas Armstrong back to the program. Nicholas, great to see you once again.
Thank you so much for having me back on. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, for those who are meeting you for the first time, take just a moment here. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, certainly. So I am Nicholas Armstrong. I am a policy analyst at the Texas Public Policy Foundation here in Austin, Texas, and I work primarily on healthcare. And I work on our Center for Health and Families. So a little bit of family policy, but mostly healthcare policy, spanning on the state level, and sometimes I like to dabble in the federal issues.
Well, we've got a doozy of a topic pertaining to healthcare, and that is drug prices. Which, for anybody who isn't on, monthly, prescriptions, or who hasn't had an illness and had to go and get a prescription filled, you're in for some sticker shock. It's not getting cheaper. But when it comes to lowering drug prices, talk to me about what has the current administration been doing to try to bring down prices, and then let's talk about if there are better ways to accomplish lowering prices.
Certainly, yes. So the president back in May signed an executive order that has aimed to lower the cost of drugs in the United States. And President Trump has, even in his first term, has addressed this, or has this has been an issue for him. And this is something that's very bipartisan for Americans, that they want lower drug prices. And so what the executive order basically does is it ties the domestic prices here in the US to prices to the lowest price in developed countries such as Europe, the UK, France, some of the Canada, some of those other countries that we're allies with, because they often have lower prices for their drugs than we do here in the US. And so the president is basically just saying there are lower prices. Why do we as Americans have to pay the highest price? And so he's just tying those to the lowest available price. But that certainly does come with some, policy is certainly just trade-offs. There's no silver bullet. And so there are things to consider with establishing a most favored nation policy like the president has done with his executive order.
Nicholas, I have to ask this just because I've wondered this myself. Uh, why is it that we pay so much comparatively? For instance, I have a friend who regularly goes to Mexico and stocks up on prescription drugs, and they are so inexpensive compared to the drugs that we would be issued, through a pharmacy here. Why is there such a disparity?
Well, that's a very big question. So the United States is really the only country that does this, where we have a lot of middlemen. There's a lot of people that get paid, and just kind of uh, broadening out here a little bit. It's because the patient has been removed as the primary benefactor, the one who shops, and the one who actually pays for their services. And kind of a chart that kind of manifests this is over at AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. They have a chart of services based on inflation, or how much they increase due to inflation. And hospital services in the last two iterations have been the highest inflationary price affected by price. And when you look at it, that's what I mean. When we go to the hospital, we don't know what we're paying, and some of the lower parts, the prices have actually fallen with TVs or other issues like that. You just go to Walmart and it says $300, and you just pay $300. And so where this goes with drug prices is, we don't have. I mean, look at GoodRx, like something like Mark Cuban is trying to do, where he is saying, here's your prescription, here's a 30-day, here's what you pay for it. And people are paying pennies on the dollar for this when they actually have the transparency and know what the drug is, what it's going to cost. And whereas you have with the current system that we have now, with pharmacy benefit managers are in the middle, the insurance companies are having to pay institutions or programs like the 340B program, with all of these that are just shrouded in mystery to patients, to insurers, and it's a lot of closed door conversations. There's not a lot of transparency, so it shouldn't shock us that drug prices are high when patients are not the ones who are shopping and figuring out what is best for their healthcare to be beneficial.
This is an imperfect analogy, but it sounds like a classic case of too many chefs spoils the
Too,
meal.
too many
Um,
cooks in the kitchen.
there we go. So let's talk about this. The president he enacted an executive order back in May. Has it had the intended effect that he wanted?
Right, so the jury is still kind of out on that a little bit because the executive order tasks Senator or not, excuse me, not Senator, Secretary Kennedy at HHS to negotiate the price and basically get people together and figuring out how we can lower those drug prices, where the drug manufacturers are trying to lower their prices through negotiations. And so there's a 6-month period. So there was a 30-day period where Secretary Kennedy and the drug manufacturers were getting together to negotiate on prices. And there is now a 6-month period to where the manufacturers basically have some time to negotiate or figure out how they're going to hit some of those prices that the Secretary Kennedy has been tasked with formulating. But it seems as though the administration has also signaled that they're willing to enact these most favored nation policies through rule setting. So the jury is still kind of out on what type of benefit and what type of that's going to happen with this most favored nation policy.
So let's talk about some of the things that the president could do to help further, bringing down these drug costs. First thing I have to ask is, are these things that he could do rooted in the free market? Because that's the direction I always want to look when I'm looking for solutions. That's the first place I'd like to go.
Yes, certainly there are certain parts of the free market that he could be doing. There's certain things, right? There's more than one way in the South down here. We like to say there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way that the president can use free market principles to address some of these concerns with patients have with drug prices. And so one of those is simply transparency within PBMs or with the 340B market. There's also patents. Back in the 80s, the there's laws that were passed that it's much like the same that Disney does with all of their trademark. They simply just tweak something a little bit, and then the drug, in this particular case, the drug is then covered by the patent more. And so those are ways that the president could, but that would have legislation, and that would safeguard those drug prices further down the line for Americans, rather than an executive order that could just be with the same pen that you can, author an executive order is the same pen that can undo another executive order by an administration down the road. And so there are more substantial ways besides just executive action. Not that you can't take executive action, but to safeguard some of those drug prices and further free market reforms down the road.
And I'm sorry to do this with just a little over a minute left, but talk to me about the 340B program and where reform may come into play with that.
Right. So the 340B program was created as a way for rural hospitals and critical access hospitals that saw a lot of Medicaid patients or uninsured patients. Basically, what they do is they can buy drugs at a steeply discounted price, but the federal law actually doesn't require them to pass those benefits on to the patients that they actually serve. And so, with those margins of profit that they make on those drugs, I mean, if the president basically or Congress just basically said, hey, X percentage of that has to go to, you have to show we're giving you this social contract with this benefit. You have to prove to us or show us basically where that money is going. Are you actually serving the patients that the program is intended to reach? And there's lots of evidence in different medical journals like the New England Journal of Medicine that there is no difference between the mortality rate, or there was not a lower mortality rate among low income patients that had the access to the 340B hospital. They didn't expand services. And so that could possibly be a way to bring down the prices of healthcare in general, along with drug prices, by actually, letting the discounts be passed back to the patients that need it.
Again, we are talking with Nicholas Armstrong. He's a policy analyst at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, as well as a Young Voices contributor. Nicholas, where can people follow you on social media? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, so my work can be found on texaspolicy.com, and then you can follow me on X at nickstrong901, and where you can see some of my tweets.
Well, thanks again for your time. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty.
And we are back. This is Moving Forward with Young Voices. Hey, we're happy to welcome Anna Mays back to the program. Anna, good to see you once again. And for those who are maybe meeting you for the very first time, take just a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian, for having me on once again. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anna Mays. I am an economics graduate from Grove City College, and I now am a Young Voices contributor, where I mainly discuss the intersection of economics, culture, and faith.
Nice. And we've got a great article here of yours from Real Clear Politics, Gen Z women leaving the left, adopting lifestyle conservatism. Now, look, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not proud of it, but that's, those are the facts. But I'm watching Gen Z with an incredible fascination because this generation really seems to have they seem to have their heads on their shoulders, and I'm not just trying to give you hollow compliments here. They're taking a much different approach than the generation just before them, the millennials. Talk to me a little bit about Gen Z in particular. Are there any reasons why either male or female, why they are tending to skew a little bit back more towards traditional principles?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think at its core, Gen Z behaviors, we can call it, is really a reaction to this radical individualism that is perpetrated through society for the past couple generations. And I think Gen Z is really the one that's waking up and saying, this does not make me happy. I need community. I need a sense of belonging. And they're absolutely right. It's an essential part of human flourishing.
So I just saw something the other day. In fact, it's been making the rounds on X, so it must be true, right? That's showing a supposed breakdown between the priorities for Gen Z males versus Gen Z females, and there does appear to be some rather different alignment. But you make the case that Gen Z women sometimes are branded as hyper liberal, but the data isn't necessarily telling us the full story there. What is the full story?
Well, I think we are seeing women that at this point in time still vote very progressively. And I think that's where that hyper liberal branding comes from. But even in my own personal life experience, we see women that are rejecting hookup culture because they are not satisfied with that. They are gravitating towards wanting a family, wanting children, not wanting to work, 60 hours a week and calling it fulfillment. And I think that simply they're gravitating towards things that actually make them happier in a practical sense. So while their politics may not be always following, there's a little bit of a gap there. We see this sort of awakening, at least culturally.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I've heard the narratives out there. Well, of course, they're breaking free of the patriarchy, and there's it's very politicized, and this is not an easy subject to discuss. Leaving that politicizing influence aside, but in your opinion, what is it that's different between the millennial generation and Gen Z? Did the people who pushed the really I'm going to use the term hard left, but the really in your face kind of cultural stuff. Are they have they reached the point of diminishing returns, and that's why we're seeing Gen Z take a different path?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think Gen Z has been a witness to a lot of unhappiness. Even in, my parents are millennials, and I felt like they've always had to kind of strive against what everyone else in their generation was doing in order to seek truth, beauty, goodness, and happiness in their day to day lives. I think Gen Z has been a witness to a lot of unhappy people, but they are also a generation where, especially during COVID, their education was ingrained in this hyper individualism. They were taught that that was virtuous. That's what it meant to live a good life. And when that really was in place in their schools, in their jobs, in the culture around them, and they discovered that this is what we were told is happiness, and we are very, very unhappy. It's really just a reaction to that.
Very interesting. I know in your article you talk about how we're in a time where there's trust in institutions is collapsing, and things that once were kind of made fun of, the trad wife movement or homemaking and modesty, actually seem to be making a comeback.
Yes, absolutely. And in large, I do think that's reactionary, but I think it's also something a little bit deeper. I think parents in particular are waking up and going, I want to be the primary educator of my child. And often that looks like the wife or mother staying at home, but that's not always the case, you know. And I think it's, I want to be instilling virtue and purpose in my children.
It seems like children seem to be one of those key pivot points too, in terms of this swing in direction. And the thing I was telling you about earlier, you know, this breakdown between Gen Z males and females. One of the key things they pointed out was, well, the Gen Z males, that's a high priority for them. They want kids. They want to have a family. It was slightly lower in terms of, you know, where it went in priorities for the Gen Z females, at least according to the survey that I had seen. But it seems like that seems to be one of the central planks of how people define happiness. Is that consistent with what you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. And I think I actually know the different article that has been floating around that you're talking about. I saw that Gen Z women in particular rank like children 12th on their list of things. And the continual follow up with that is, well, that's why they're unhappy. They're not cultivating a family, cultivating a community, all of these things that contribute to human flourishing. But I think what I'm also seeing here is you have a little bit more polarized of a generation. In Gen Z, it almost seems like you are either really progressive or you are really conservative. And I think what we're seeing here in this movement is we have a lot of the people, which I would say is the majority, that hold those more moderate positions kind of shift naturally, culturally, to be something that's a little bit more conservative to kind of meet their needs that way.
I love something you call for in your article is you say that conservative institutions like churches, media, think tanks need to do more than just applaud this shift. You talk about they need to steward it. What does that mean to steward it?
It means to love your neighbor, to love your family, and to cultivate values in your own household. I don't think this is a change that starts with the government or these large sponsored institutions. I think it starts at your dinner table. It starts with knocking on your neighbor's door next door and asking them if they need any help with anything.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty doable. Doesn't need an act of Congress or anything. And one of the things I wanted to ask as well, does it mean less reliance on government to take the lead or to institute a policy that then everyone must follow? It sounds like this actually begins with individuals and then makes its way up the chain.
It absolutely does. And I think a big part of this is that government should be restricted to its proper role. It is supposed to dissuade evil and promote good, but it's not supposed to take over the institution of the family or the church by any means.
And I really love the last part of your article here about how Gen Z women were told to chase freedom and found themselves lost. And now they're quietly rejecting the noise and walking toward meaning. And the bigger question that follows that is, will conservative institutions walk with them or miss the moment entirely? How can they best walk with them or help to encourage that shift to continue?
To put it quite simply, Brian, I think they need to be the friend that they would have wanted. You need to be the community that you want. And that change starts with the individual, you know, on this small micro scale.
You are talking my language. Thank you so much. Anna Mays is our guest. She's a Young Voices contributor and economics graduate from Grove City College. Anna, where can people follow your work and where can they find you on social media?
Well, you can find this article at Real Clear Politics, but you can also follow me on Instagram at Anna McQueen Mays.
Very good. Looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. This is our fourth and final segment today, and I am happy to welcome Bautista Vivanco to the program, back to the program, actually. It's good to have you on here again. For those who are meeting you for the first time, take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be back. My name is Bautista. I'm originally from Argentina. I am currently a health policy researcher based in Washington, D.C., and I've been a Young Voices contributor for a couple of months now. This is going to be my second appearance here on this program.
Well, and this is a timely topic that you and I are going to be discussing. I'm looking at a piece you wrote for the Cato Institute. This is called Trusted Abroad, Blocked at Home, Why Americans Need a Passport for Proven Medicines. Set the stage for me here. When it comes to these proven medicines, are we talking about over-the-counter medicines or a mix of prescription as well as over-the-counter? Help me understand where Americans may not have the advantages that others may have, in accessing the drugs that they need.
Absolutely. And what's interesting here is that you're pretty much looking at almost anything under the sun. We were able to obtain our hands on the most comprehensive databases on drug approvals for the two countries, and we found out there are 69 different medicines that Canadians have access to that are illegal, that are blocked by the FDA in America. These include things from drugs that are used for very rare conditions, things that are, for instance, certain diseases that affect children, like Fabry's disease. We even have some for diabetics. We have, for instance, that Canada has approved the world's first weekly insulin injection. I don't know if you have friends that sadly have diabetes and they need to take a daily dose of insulin. Well, this product allows you to take it only once a week. It's blocked in the US. You can access it in Canada. And we even have, funny enough, sunscreens as well. Canada has approved some sunscreen active ingredients. I know, people don't usually think of Canada as the place to get tanned and go to the beach, but they're doing much better than the US. The last time the FDA approved a sunscreen active ingredient was in 1999, in fact. That was before I was born.
So why is it that the US will block some of these drugs when they're readily available in these other countries? I can't make myself believe that these other countries have been duped into allowing things that are dangerous or harmful.
Oh, yes, that is definitely the quarrel that we have here. And the issue is that the FDA bureaucrats, they impose the burden of safety and efficacy on drug manufacturers. If you want to have a product be available for Americans, a medicine or sunscreen, you need to spend a lot of money to do the necessary testing and run the experiments to make sure that it's safe, that it would be okay for Americans to consume, and then it has to be approved by the FDA. So what we're hearing, this mixture of 69 different medicines includes drugs that have been blocked by the FDA. The bureaucrats thought that it was not safe, that it was not effective, or even some drugs that the manufacturer was just thinking, well, we are not going to have that many consumers in the US buying this product, so it would not make economic sense for us to go through the lengthy and costly process of obtaining regulatory approval for them. So they just did not even submit an application.
Wow. I mean, look, anytime a person goes to, when they're prescribed a drug and when they go to get it, it seems like there's an awful lot of middlemen and there's a lot of complication that, in my opinion, is likely unnecessary. But it's discouraging to hear that other countries apparently have found a way to make these things work. And I just have to wonder, in whose interest is the FDA working, for instance? Is it for the patients or is it for protection for pharmaceutical companies in the US?
As you mentioned, it's a matter of incentives going on here. So if you work at the FDA and if you block a drug or a medicine that it's very effective, it's great for the patients, but you block it, nobody is going to be coming on your door and ask you questions about why didn't you do your job. Your job is to regulate at the end of the day. Now, if hypothetically you were to approve a drug that is considered that might have certain potent side effects, or God forbid someone were to die because of they didn't read how to consume the drug or whatever, you might need to go and have to testify in front of Congress. Your job might be on the line. So there is a clear incentive for the FDA to be extra safe and to make sure that that they err in the side of caution. The problem is that sidelines the rights of patients, that they should have the right to access the drugs they need, especially terminally ill patients and people that don't really have many treatment options. The government is making that decision for them because of that, for that reason.
It's fascinating too, looking at your article here, that of these 69 medications that Canadians can obtain, I'm surprised how many of them aren't outright banned in the US because, well, no, your dog or your horse,
I
they
know.
can have it.
Oh, yes, there is a number that are approved in the US, just not for humans. So if you're a horse or you're a dog, and even if you're funny enough, even if you are a cat and a veterinary prescribes it off label, you can access it. But a veterinarian cannot prescribe these things off label for humans. So yeah, it is funny, but at the same time, it's just very saddening that this is the reality that we have to live in.
So is there any likelihood of this changing in the near future?
Well, that's probably a question that you should be asking policymakers, congressmen, and people that work here in Washington, D.C. have the power to make this better. One way in which me and my co-author, Jeff Singer, we propose to improve the situation would be by incorporating a reciprocity agreement in which we look at comparable nations, for instance, Canada, and we have the US approved drugs that have also been approved in Canada. That would be a small incremental step moving in the right direction. And the great thing is that it's not something that it's crazy or that has never been done before. Many countries, they have similar programs. For instance, Israel automatically approves drugs that are available in the US, Australia, I believe in the European Union as well. So other countries have been doing this and it's been working really, really well.
And you also point this out in the article, but I think this has to be mentioned too. This has been going on for a long time. This is not just a recent development. Oh, just in the last couple of years. I mean, going back to the 1970s, these
Abs-
drugs, are not available to Americans, but still available in Canada.
Absolutely. We tried to estimate exactly what was the average time that these drugs had been available in Canada. And on average, they've been available there for 25 years. So we're not talking about drugs we don't really know what the interaction effects are. We don't really know the safety data and information. No, these have been around for enough time that we know exactly how safe or unsafe they are. Yet patients in America cannot access these drugs, which in many cases they can provide remarkable improvements to the ones that we presently have here.
So again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions here at the FDA, but is lobbying a part of the reason why they keep that regulatory monopoly in place?
Well, definitely. One of the thing with lobbying is that if you were a pharmaceutical manufacturer that already has a product approved in the United States, it is within your interest to make sure that another better, more improved product doesn't come into the market, because then you might be looking down the barrel that your market share would get reduced. So there's definitely within the interest of the industry to ensure that the regulations remain what they are. And especially these big pharmaceutical companies, they want to make sure that the barriers to entry to the market are as high as possible, because small startup innovative companies cannot really pay all the money required to satisfy the requirements of the FDA. But these very, very large companies that are essentially swimming in money, they have a much better chance at doing that. Although I would say that even they are struggling to bring their own products into the market. When we were talking before about this once weekly insulin injection, the manufacturer of this product, which was Novo Nordisk, they tried to get regulatory approval, but it got denied. And then they proposed certain
I
changes.
have to stop you here because we're unfortunately up against the
Oh,
clock here. But I want to follow up. We need to have another conversation. Bautista Vivanco, rather. Where can people find you on social media?
absolutely. I am on Twitter and LinkedIn as Bautista Vivanco.